Well, welcome to another episode of the Hector and Mike Experience. Common sense in an uncommon world. We just concluded last night the recall election of Governor Gavin Newsom, and while there's still quite a bit of ballots still out left to be counted, it looks as though Gavin Newsom has won in a very decisive win for him, being able to keep his seat as governor of one of the largest states in the union, and really what it seems like as though maybe possibly propelling him as to now there's talks of him potentially being able to run for president in a few years from now. Obviously, before that happens, he's got another campaign that he's got to get ready for in the next couple of months, which is going to be the re-election for governor, which happens in 2022. Obviously, he's got quite a bit of a war chest that we saw that he was able to use against the Republican candidates and every other person looking to run against him, and Democrats who may have thought that they wanted to run was able to kind of keep him at bay. Mike, what you think of the night?
Is the bar open yet?
I think the bar opens at 7 in the morning, so I think it is. Yes.
I don't think it closed from last night in some places.
Yeah.
It was a big win for him. And there's no doubt about it. And if you look at winners and losers, he's clearly a winner. He's clearly a winner in the state. He's clearly a winner on the national scene. Democrats have taken their lumps over the last couple of months with the botched pullout of Afghanistan, the death of those soldiers, also the resignation of Cuomo in New York, another major Democrat. So him coming and winning this thing and winning it by a substantial margin, whether it's 60-40 or 65-35, that's a substantial margin. And so, it's a big win for him. It's a big political win. Ironically, today, the day after, the issues that we faced back in February when it was certified, the issues that we faced the year before that when they started collecting signatures are still there. I mean, there's wildfire burning in the north. There's no water in the Central Valley. Crime is even worse than it was. The pandemic right now seems to be on a lull here, but that's only until the next variant shows up from who knows where. So the problems we face are still there. It's just a year and I don't know how many millions of dollars later. And this is what I say, and it's not popular. It's certainly not popular in my household. But the reality is we elect our elected officials. And, I think, honestly, if you want to look at what's wrong in California, it's what people decided. They elect people. They elect people that they want to represent them. And if you go in and elect someone who has the kind of agenda that's been there and the kind of agenda that's, has the state in the situation it's in, whether it's in an election, a regular election, a recall election, or whatever, that's the government you get. So, there's no, it's complete transparency. You're not getting any surprises with a Gavin Newsom or a Kamala Harris or any of the liberal Democrats here. It's what the majority of the people of the state want. And so that's what they get.
And Mike, and going into that, we saw a great shift in this recall. There was that point in time a couple months ago where it was a 50-50 split. 50% of Californians were looking to, were in favor of recalling Gavin Newsom. And there was a real discussion that his job was in danger. Mm-hmm. And then there was a monumental shift, whether the campaign strategy changed. He then figured out who he wanted to run against. He decided to run against Larry Elder. They went out and dug out things that Larry Elder had said, 15, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and, portrayed him. And this kind of goes into what you had said is, the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And they went out there and just basically demonized Larry Elder, demonized a lot of the things he said, and said, look, you know who I am. You know what I'm going to do. You may not like it all, but are you sure you want that person? And they were able to also use the recent changing of the law in Texas, and say, women's rights are going to be in jeopardy if you don't choose me, or if you don't keep me in office. Women's rights are going to be changed around here in California, which we all know that with the supermajority they have, none of that will change. But nonetheless, I think for me the summary last night is, and it's also very unpopular with some of my friends, is that politics wins over policy.
Sure does.
9 times out of 10. And in this situation, it was another clear example that once again, politics won over policy.
Absolutely right. It was a political win for Gavin Newsom. You brought up Texas, which is a great point. And they talk about it's funny when you use the T word in this election. It's they keep using Trump. Texas is a huge. I don't want to say game changer, but there are seminal moments in national politics. Okay, January 6th was a seminal moment because even though the election was done, even though there was still questions going on, right or wrong, about the results, it was all civil. When what happened at the Capitol, the riot that happened at the Capitol, and you see people breaking windows and storming through and all of that other stuff, that was a seminal moment in politics that people looked at and said, oh my God. We had another seminal, and that one was obviously hurt the Republicans. We had another one back in August 30th, when we saw people dropping off of airplanes, American airplanes taking off, trying to get out of Afghanistan, all of the chaos that ensued, and then 13 American soldiers are killed. That was another seminal moment in national consciousness. And this time it affected the Democrats. I would say the Texas decision and what's happened in Texas is one of those things that will galvanize Democrat voters across the country. And I think it played some role here, but what concerns me as a Republican is that it's going to play a significant role in about a month and a half in Virginia, where right now you have a similar situation. It's a regular election for governor, but you have a Republican and a Democrat that are very, very close. In fact, they're dead even in the polls. That's the kind of seminal things that happen in national politics that can impact an election on the state level. So you're absolutely right about that. The one thing I would say about the whole Larry Elder thing, and again, not going to be popular here, after 15 years of losing in California, Republicans have gotten really good at pointing blame at people. We lost because of this. We lost because of that. We lost because of the other thing. Well, you know what? Find out how you win, not how, why you lost, and do something about it. I mean, Larry Elder comes into this thing and sucks up all the air. Well, you know what? It's it's the responsibility of the people running against him to do something about that. Okay? Not just sit and say, oh, he sucked up all the air, to figure out a change in their strategy and their plan to counter that so that they remain relevant. Obviously, that never happened because you look at the results in the second ballot and how, Elder ran away with it. Those kinds of things, when the whole thing with Elder and his ex-girlfriend came out, it was basically him saying, there's no truth to it, and then moving on. No discussion whatsoever. Well, we know from 2020 that one of the main reasons, one of the biggest groups that Trump lost from 2016 were women voters, especially suburban women voters. Why you don't address that in a campaign instead of just saying, oh, it's nonsense and it's that kind, just kind of like, don't bother me with this. Why you don't address that is beyond me, because it's bad enough when people don't know who you are, like it was with Larry Elder. They knew he was a radio show guy, but they didn't know what his policies were. When you have quotes on the record in your radio show about things that you said.
Are they coming after you, Mike? Are they coming after you right now? What's it? I hear the sirens going here. I think
they're trying to do the paddles on the recall as we speak.
There you go.
When you have the comments that he made, which are easily taken out of context, That's bad enough. But when the other side has $43 million of ammunition to point at you, and it's a strategic mistake not to address it. It's a strategic mistake not for the people running against Larry Elder to pound on that every single day. And I also think it was a strategic mistake not to constantly, every single day, remind people of the thing that galvanized this whole effort, which was the French Laundry. I mean, that was a seminal moment in California where this thing finally came together and took off as a recall, not because of policy, but because of arrogance. And you beat that drum until you can't beat it anymore, because that's what got people going. So I just think there needs to be some introspection here of what do we do different, how do we do it differently, because we've gotten very good in California, just saying, well, we can't win because of the voter registration. Give me a break. I mean, you're right. It means you can't just win all of the Republican votes and win an election, but that's not how you win elections in most places. So,
well, and in one of those areas, I mean, there's talk now. Okay, do you how long do you lick your wounds for? And especially given that you've got an election coming up in about a year. And so do you come out now and just, start taking out the knives and saying, okay, let's look at the homeless situation, look at the crime, look at this. And there is someone to blame for it. I mean, you've got the person who's been top of the office. He's been there for 3 years, almost 3 years as governor. But more importantly, he's been there at 8 more years as lieutenant governor. So he's been there for, about, 11 years in office, in top positions where you can make some of these changes. There's been a lot of promises made, obviously, during the campaign. I know we've always joked around after we've won an election, it's like, someone go figure out everything we've promised, because now comes the hard part, which is governing. Yeah. And so, as people woke up today, the same problems that we had yesterday, that we had 6 months ago, that we had a year ago, have only gotten worse. And so I don't see anything getting better. I see a lot of talk about climate change, which is fine. But when are we going to start building the water storage we need in order to ensure that we have enough water for the 40 million, people that we have now? If we do, if with all the climate change folks, with more erratic weather patterns, then you need that storage. Where's the affordable housing? What are we doing with the homeless situation? And so there's a lot of issues out there. I also agree with you that the Texas law has galvanized, and I'm going to change it a little bit, not just Democrats to really get them motivated to come out, but I think it also gave a lot of pause to independents and even some Republicans who this isn't their main issue. Their main issue may be economics, their main issue may be crime or something else, but it gave them a lot of pause and saying, wait a minute here, now you're infringing on my decision as to what I want to do. I see the Democrats using this playbook, and not only using it in Virginia, which the election's happening on November 2nd, but also maybe being able to carry it over, if they possibly can, into the fights over for Congress.
I'm sure they will, and it is and because the bill is so, even if you're pro-life, it is so I don't want to say draconian, but so hard that you're right. Even Republicans, even independents, it gives them pause, and ultimately, who knows what how it ends up, but it does impact. I think it will have an impact going forward, like you said. And you're right about all of those things you mentioned: the homelessness, the crime, the water. All of that still is there, and it's not going away, and it's not getting better. I guess the question I just have is for people that are out there, and ask them, don't you care about this stuff? And we, the opponents, the loyal opposition, have to create and present a case of what we would do differently that's realistic. And we have to be prepared for the fact that no matter who it is that's the candidate is going to be pummeled. and they've got to be ready to either punch back or know how to get a defensive posture and stay on message. And I'll use this example. Someone who's a friend of ours, says that Kevin Faulkner's a moderate. Okay, this is one of the things I heard this morning. We need someone like Kevin Faulkner because he's a moderate. Well, I've got his direct mail pieces, saying he's a conservative, but it doesn't matter. I think Kevin Faulkner is probably more mainstream. That's probably a better word, okay? But if the other side has $43 million and you don't have half of that, and you don't have the ability to, be ready and fight back and punch back as effectively or more effectively, they can paint you however you want with $43 million. And so, it's as much the tactical things of being ready to counterattack, to deflect the attack, or to answer the attack, that we're just not ready for. I mean, Elder showed that, I think. I think, Larry Elder was going along really well. Forget the Trump stuff. He was going along really well. And then all of a sudden, the thing came out with the ex-girlfriend, and then it just seemed to take, I don't know if it was change in leadership or whatever, it seemed to take a different path. Even to the end last week when he was talking about, is the election going to be stolen? It's like, dude, this was like Wednesday or Thursday. You don't do Monday morning quarterbacking on why you lost until Monday morning. Last week, people are doing Monday morning quarterbacking on why they were going to lose before the Tuesday election. Where I come from, you don't do that, because that says to people you're not a real player. And so I think that's another thing we have to learn is, you play the game until the end. You be ready for, it's coming, and don't whine about it. If you know it's coming, figure out either with money, with tactics, with whatever, how you counter that before it hits you. I mean, that to me is one of the things Republicans need to learn on a statewide level. They've learned it very well, I think, in some congressional seats. But they haven't learned it on a state level. The other thing I just want to mention, because I remember when I moved out here, everybody said to me, well, there's two Californias. There's the North and the South. And, I was like, okay, that's interesting. And you could tell a difference in kind of culture and attitude and stuff like that. But really, if you look at the map, there is two Californias, but it's an East and a West. I mean, you look at the map on any state election, and you start on the coast, and I'm not sure what it is in the water out in the Pacific, but you start on the coast, and it's all blue, 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 and then all of a sudden it just turns red and goes to the Nevada border. So it really is two different Californias, and maybe you have to run two different campaigns. But we just need to do a better job of messaging, preparation, all of the block and tackling stuff that needs to be done, because if we don't, it's going to be another 15 years before we win a statewide election.
Well, and you're right. I mean, one of the frustrating parts for me, and this is, I couldn't agree with you more in the sense of this whole discussion of the election is going to be stolen. It's rigged, before all the ballots are in. It's loser mentality. It's you fight all the way to the bitter end. If the polls close at 8 p.m., but there's still people in line, you're still fighting. You're still convincing people. They're on their phones. Do something. And at the same time, what happens with it is by having this whole discussion of it being rigged, there's maybe election improprieties. Then what you're doing is you're telling your potentially your supporters, there's no reason for you to go turn out.
Exactly.
You can stay home, because no matter what happens, it's going to be rigged, and it's rigged for the other person. And so why am I going to go do something or go turn out or get out of my home, go stand in line for something that someone else is telling me is rigged? And so what you do is you just kill a bunch of your own votes, and you kill a bunch of your votes a week before the election.
Exactly. I want to say a positive thing. I know that the Republican Party here in California did a massive effort over the weekend, this past weekend. And I give all of those people that came out that knocked on doors, made phone calls, did the phone banks, and all of those kinds of things, 1,000% credit, because they didn't quit. They didn't care what the numbers said. They didn't care what the analysts said. They didn't care what the political professionals who were making some coin on all of this said. They had a belief, and they went out and they did it. And despite all of that stuff that you just mentioned was going on. And so, I applaud those people because they've got it it's in their heart and in their gut. But you're absolutely right. It's like, you know what? It is a quitter's mentality. It really is. When you have people spinning last week, this is why we're going to lose. This is what happened, or we were helpless, or if you know it's coming and you don't prepare for it and you don't have an answer for it, you kind of deserve what you're going to get. It's like the hurricane's coming and you don't want to go to the store and get the nails in the wood and board up the windows. You don't want to get the generator charged up. You don't want to get the water going. And then it comes and it's like, oh, I got whacked by a hurricane. Well, it's coming. Prepare for it, or figure out how you counter in campaigns. You figure out how you counter it, and we just don't do that. We really don't. And I got to tell you, I think some of the things, some of the other ones, other campaigns that were in this thing, I don't think did the party any good, quite honestly. I look at, to name names, Caitlyn Jenner. Seriously. I just, I actually thought when she announced if she, the transgender stuff aside, that brought some attention to her. But if she had something to say and something to offer, people would have listened to her. But she couldn't make up her mind on anything. One interview she's pro-Trump, the next interview with CNN she's anti-Trump. First candidate I've ever seen in politics who was not honest about her voting record, in the sense of she actually voted and said she didn't. Every other candidate I've ever seen that they catch them on their voting record, it's like they say they voted and they didn't. In her case, she said she didn't vote and she did. It was bizarre. John Cox and his bear. If the bear was on the ballot, the bear probably would have got more votes. We've got to get serious about this stuff, or else we're going to keep losing. And we're the state's in tough enough shape, as you said. The policies haven't changed at all. And we're going to be in trouble.
Well, and the other thing that I want to, for some of our listeners, is next year is going to be a very unique year, and it's going to be very pivotal. We always hear every single election cycle, this is the most consequential election of our lifetime. This is going to, but and while I hate that whole discussion, next year's going to be interesting because right now in the Senate, you got a 50-50 split. But in Congress, right now, you've got Nancy Pelosi with a 4 to 5 seat lead in the House. But you got to remember that next year is redistricting. All the lines get to move. California loses a seat. There's other states that will have seats, but there's other states like Texas and Florida that have actually gained seats. Right. And so seeing as how these lines get redrawn will have a big determination as to who controls Congress. There's going to be potentially a lot more competitive House seats, and so there'll be a lot of different campaigning. There may be Democrat on Democrat, and so you're going to find a situation where 2022 is going to be a year where there's going to be quite a bit of money spent, because if you are in a safe seat, but let's say, for example, you're in a state like California where they put 2 Democrats together to have to fight it out into 1 seat, that potentially is your seat for the next 10 years, right, if you're in a safe seat. And so you'll get the Republican on Democrat, Democrat on Democrat, Republican on Republican. And a lot of it's going to be for the battle of Congress, and also the battle for what happens to the agenda for Joe Biden moving forward in the next couple of years.
Let's hope. Did you hear that? I got to say, you're right. The battle, the Senate is going to be interesting. Obviously, I don't know how Republicans win the Senate seat out here, but they do have a shot of taking control of the Senate. They have an excellent shot of taking control of the House, and that I think that's why you see this breakneck speed of the Biden administration moving on all of these progressive leftist policies in the first 2 years, because I think they know that come November of 2022, there's probably a good likelihood they won't have control of the House. And so, they'll get stymied. Right now, the only thing that stymies them is Mitch McConnell and the filibuster over in the Senate. So, I think they see the handwriting on the wall, and that's why they're moving at breakneck speed about a lot of these progressive pieces of legislation. And, if that happens, then the Republicans are going to be in a position of responsibility of coming up with alternatives. They're going to be sellable and palatable to the people, which I think they will be able to do. But in California, I just, I look at it and I say, if you couldn't beat Gavin Newsom now, if you couldn't beat him after 2 million plus people signed a petition, and you had a special election, and all you had to do was get 50% plus one in the question one. All you had to do is get plus one more than your second person on question two. We've got this we've got this open primary system in California, where you could end up someone. It doesn't guarantee that it's going to be a Democrat or a Republican running against each other. This was a perfect opportunity. It really was, and it went by the boards in a big way. Right. So I don't know how you beat him next year at this point. Policies aside, the negative campaign that they've mastered, he's mastered, other Democrats have mastered in this state, of portraying someone as something that that they want you to believe and perceive. We've got to get better at that. We've got to get better at countering that. And I don't see it happening next year.
Right.
I really don't. I don't know who's going to run. I don't know if Elder will run again. I don't know if Kevin Faulconer will run again. They should. Why not? But I just don't know that if we couldn't do it in a perfect storm, I don't know how we do it in an election where the top of the ticket's going to be a U.S. Senate race that is going to probably drive the Latino vote in this state up, considerably, because it's, Latino U.S. Senator. And I think it's going to be very tough. If I don't think it's possible. I really don't at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult. And I think a lot of it goes right back into an area where the party needs to grow from the bottom up. It really needs to focus and, on, and I remember when you were there as the executive director of the California Republican Party, we need to start looking at our city council seats, looking at our school board seats, right. Start making noise in some of those areas and give cover for some of the folks that are in our state houses. I remember you had the San Diego party along with other parties that did a pretty good job of focusing on some of those local elections, and we need to kind of get a resurgence of that. We need to, it'd be interesting. I'd love to be able to get, maybe bring onto his podcast, whether it's Tony Kovarik or Ron Nearing, who ran that operation, and talk to them about, what they did and what they see moving forward, especially as it deals with local elections and the impact it would have, over a period of course of time, and bringing them forward. But you're right. It is going to be a difficult one. I think all the oxygen will get sucked up, not just by the U.S. Senate seat, but also by all these congressional fights that are going to be happening, because they're going to be multi-million dollars, and and there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm. And the Texas law, if nothing gets settled with it, it will be used as a sledgehammer against Republicans. Whether even though it's a Texas law, not a California law. We just saw this in this election, and it'll be curious to see what happens in Virginia and how Terry McAuliffe ends up using that or his supporters.
And the difference is, we can have a pro-life candidate who's a moderate pro-life candidate, if you will, allows for abortion in the case of rape, incest, the threat of life of the mother, and stuff like that. But they can still be portrayed. If the other side has enough money, it will be a national issue. And the only thing I would say is this: we're 9 months into this year. We've had, I think, three very seminal national political moments: January 6th, August 30th, and the Texas thing. There'll be probably about two or three more of those between now and next year. Who knows what they are? But they do have an impact on elections nationwide. And, if you look at the map of the results as of today here in California on the recall, it basically looks like a statewide election in California. There's nothing different about it. Everything, to the west of a certain area is blue. Everything to the east is red. It looks like a typical election, which means that we got to do something different. And if we don't, it's going to look that way again. We have to have candidates that and this has been a secret, I think, on Congress here in California. We've been able to win seats because, A, we've had good candidates. And by good candidates, I'm not talking about ideology, okay? I'm talking about people that fit the community that they seek to serve.
Right.
They're part of that community. They have a track record in that community. They're respected in that community. They are articulate. They are positive. They're people that you want to believe in. And they also are fighters.
Right.
They're not going to sit there and take a punch. They're either going to know how to counterpunch or defend themselves. And, we need more of that at the state level here. And, maybe we're not ready for that. I don't know. After 15 years, I would have hoped we were. The other thing I just want to mention about this, because people forget history. It's easy to forget history. And they say, oh, Arnold won in a recall election. And that doesn't, what's the big deal about that? And to that I call BS, because, yeah, he won in the recall. And then in 2005, you remember this, Arnold put on a bunch of ballot initiatives on the state level that would reform California considerably. It was his attempt to blow up the boxes, as he called it. And he invoked the ire of the unions, the police, the fire. They were protesting him, picketing him, and everything else. And every one of those ballot initiatives that he had in 2005 went down in flames. And I remember that night in 2005 in the hotel ballroom, and the person I was looking at as Arnold was speaking was Maria Shriver. And she had this look on her face that I have seen a few times in my household, which is, oh man, I'm going to put on a helmet before I go home because I'm going to get an earful. And you know what? He was at a pretty low moment at that point, and yet he was able to pull it together. And in 2006, his campaign had a strategy. They repackaged him. They ran a great campaign. I remember it distinctly because I was there at the party. The day after the Democrat primary for governor, the party knew they had a small window. The campaign knew they had a small window to define the Democrat opponent against them, and spent, through the party, we spent $10 million defining who the Democrat candidate for governor was while the guy was out doing a victory lap. By the time he got back from his victory lap, his image already had been defined, and that changed the campaign. So, that was the smart way that Arnold's people ran a campaign in 2006 that easily could have gone south after what happened in 2005. So it can be done. We just got to do better. We really do.
And we could end it here on this discussion, which is, if you know who your opponent is, start defining them now.
Exactly.
There is politics takes no break. Elections take no break. I mean, the other situation is, there's always one happening right around the corner, and we've got one coming around the corner pretty soon. So,
yeah,
Mike, I think
isn't it? When's the primary for next year? June?
I believe it's in June. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's only 6 or 7 months away. It's just like Christmas keeps on coming.
And for political consultants, it does.
That's
Christmas
right.
just keeps on coming.
Ka-ching, ka-ching.
Yes. So, Mike, well, let's leave it there, and let's get back together with another episode coming in pretty soon. But this was a nice discussion here on the day after the recall. And let's maybe next time we'll dive a little bit into some of these messages of some of these candidates and what we can do about defining. I'd also, the other thing we had discussion on from our friends is the negative ads versus positive ads, and which ones work, which ones don't. So let's dive into that.
Let's just put it this way: if you have to ask that question, do negative ads work, or why do I always see negative ads? It's because they work. I mean, and it's not just this election; it's every other election that you see. And if they hit the mark, they can be deadly. Some people just do negative ads for the sake of doing negative ads. If you do a negative ad and it hits the mark and it has some element of credibility or I like to do the ones that have some humor to them, and sarcastic humor. They are devastating, and they do make a difference, and that's why people do them all the time. So, it would be great to talk about. The other thing I want to talk about, because again, we're talking politics here, is the policy stuff. Well, all of this has been going on out here. The elder stuff and the Newsom stuff and Biden coming in and Harris coming in and all this stuff. There's been this little group in Sacramento meeting up there at the state capitol, passing some really weird shit. Okay? There's no other way to put it. There's some really weird shit going on up there, and we ought to talk about some of the stuff that they've been passing.
All right, let's do that until the next time, Mike.
Thanks, Hector. Take care, everybody. Don't forget to vote again.